The alien city of Varion never slept. Its towers reached the clouds, glowing with strange purple light. Markets sang with noise. Soldiers marched in polished armor, and whispers of the Queen's wrath spread through every street. The Queen was known as fierce and merciless. Her voice enough to break generals, her hands enough to crush kingdoms. But tonight even the Queen felt fear. Her daughters had vanished. 2 young princesses born of her blood, carrying the rare glow in their eyes, symbols of her power and her line. They had been seen last during the evening meal, sitting at the long silver table inside the royal hall. Then, like a shadow carried away by wind, they were gone. No doors were broken, no guards were killed, no trace of struggle was left. It was as if the palace itself had swallowed them. The alarm spread quickly. Drums thundered through the city, summoning guards to their posts. Torches burned high on the palace walls. Messengers ran into the streets shouting the Queen's command, "Find them, or bleed." Fear turned into madness. Families locked their doors, merchants pulled shutters, and travelers rushed to hide in taverns. Everyone knew what the Queen did to traitors. If someone had taken her daughters, no corner of the galaxy would save them. Inside the great throne chamber, the Queen stood like a storm ready to break. Her crown of black metal glowed with red lines. Her eyes burned with fury. "I will tear the stars apart," she roared, "until my daughters are returned." Generals knelt, swearing their lives, but none dared look into her eyes for too long. The room trembled not from her voice, but from her grief hidden beneath the rage. Far from the palace, across the lower levels of the city, a human named Jace walked alone. He was not a soldier, not a noble, not a spy. He was only a janitor, cleaning halls and fixing broken lights where aliens did not care to bend their pride. To most, he was invisible. To himself, he was just tired tonight. His shift had run late. The streets were empty and the sound of distant drums echoed through the night. He did not know they were searching for the Queen's daughters. He only wanted to rest. But destiny does not ask. It takes. As Jace turned into a quiet alley, he noticed something strange. A small flash of silver light near the old storage building. He frowned, thinking it was a broken lamp. But then he heard it. Soft sobbing, faint, like the cry of frightened children. His heart froze. In this city, nothing good came from strange sounds in the dark. Still, his feet moved forward. The storage room door was half open. He pushed it. The hinges groaned. Inside, the air smelled of dust and old stone. Moonlight fell through the cracks, revealing 2 small figures curled up on the ground. At first he thought they were lost children from the lower districts, but then he saw their eyes glowing faint blue like stars drowned in tears. They looked at him, afraid, trembling, yet clinging to each other as if he was the monster. Jace's breath caught in his chest. These were no ordinary children. They were the daughters of the Queen. His first thought was to run. If anyone found him here, he would be killed without trial. The Queen's guards were ruthless, her laws absolute, but as the little ones whimpered, pulling closer together, something inside him stopped him from leaving. They were not fierce warriors, not symbols of power, not threats. They were just children, lost, afraid, and cold. And for the first time in his life, Jace faced a choice that could change not just his fate, but the fate of the galaxy. In the distance, boots thundered on the streets as soldiers spread out, voices shouted, lights swept over alleys. The hunt had begun. And in the small storage room, a human janitor stood between fear and mercy. His hands shook, his heart raced, but his voice came out soft. "Don't be afraid," he whispered. "I won't hurt you." The princesses looked at him with wide, glowing eyes. Neither spoke, but their silence was louder than any cry. Jace knew in that moment that his life would never again belong only to him. The night of the vanishing had begun, and the galaxy would remember it forever. The night outside the storage room was alive with danger. Drums still echoed through the alien city, and the soldiers of the Queen spread like wolves hunting in the dark. But inside, Jace stood frozen, staring at the 2 glowing-eyed girls curled up on his old bedroll. The fear in their eyes struck him deeper than any blade. They were not just daughters of a mighty queen. They were children clinging to life. Jace's heart pounded like thunder in his chest. Every instinct told him to run, to leave them before he was seen, but his feet refused to move. One of the girls, smaller than the other, tried to hide her face in her sister's arms. Her tiny fingers shook as though the air itself carried knives. The older one, trembling yet braver, stared at him with suspicion. Her glowing eyes searched his face as if weighing his soul. "Don't cry," Jace whispered, his voice breaking. "You're safe here," the word surprised even him. Safe? In a crumbling storage room with soldiers outside ready to cut down anyone. Yet the girls did not pull away. The older one tilted her head, her lip trembling. Her alien tongue formed words he did not understand, but her tone carried the same, meaning a question. Would he protect them? Jace knelt slowly, making himself small. He remembered nights in his childhood, when he too had been afraid, when no one had been there to protect him. Now, in this moment, he felt that same pain in their eyes. His hands shook as he reached into his bag and pulled out a small piece of bread he had saved from work. The younger girl's eyes widened, her hunger stronger than her fear. She reached out with trembling fingers. Her sister hesitated, but when Jace nodded, she allowed the little one to take it. For the first time that night, their sobs softened. The world outside, however, was merciless. Torches flickered in the streets. Voices shouted commands, and the sound of armored boots drew closer. Jace knew he had only moments. If the guards searched this alley, they would find him. If they looked inside, they would find the princesses. And then his blood would paint the walls. His mind raced. Should he go to the queen, return her daughters, and beg for mercy? But no, mercy was not in her heart. She would see a filthy human who dared to touch her bloodline. He would be executed, maybe tortured first. And the girls, what would happen to them then? They would be caged, silenced, or worse, used as pawns, in a power game he could not understand. The older girl crawled closer, her tiny hand gripping his sleeve. Her eyes glowed like twin stars in the dim light. Her voice cracked as she spoke in halting words, trying to form his language. "Safe. Stay. With you." Jace's breath caught. How could a child trust him, a stranger, more than her own people? It was madness, yet it burned truth into his heart. She had chosen him, and that choice was now his burden. The drums outside grew louder. Soldiers shouted, "Search every shadow." Jace's body acted before his mind could argue. He scooped the younger girl into his arms, the older clung to his side. They were small, lighter than he expected, but their fear weighed on him heavier than stone. He slipped out the back of the storage room, moving into the deeper alleys where shadows swallowed sound. The city's lower tunnels stretched like veins under the streets. Few dared to go there. Damp, dark, and filled with rusting pipes and dripping water. But Jace had worked in those tunnels, repairing old lights and carrying out garbage where no noble would step. He knew them like a secret map. If they were to survive, they had to disappear into those forgotten places. As he moved, the girls clung tighter. The younger one pressed her face into his chest, her soft sobs muffled by his shirt. The older whispered in broken words, "Hide, please. Not soldiers." Each plea tore at his soul. He had no weapon, no allies, no plan. But for them, he would find a way. At last, he reached an old hatch beneath a crumbling wall. He pushed it open with a groan of rusted metal. The tunnels yawned dark and endless below, a place where no soldier would waste time searching. Jace lowered the girls inside, then followed, pulling the hatch shut above them. For the first time that night, silence wrapped around them. Only the drip of water and the soft echo of their breaths remained. The girls huddled close to him in the shadows. Their trust was fragile but real. He felt their tiny hands gripping his sleeve, refusing to let go. And in that silence, Jace understood a terrible truth. The moment he chose to protect them, his old life was gone. He was no longer just a janitor in a city of aliens. He was now the guardian of two daughters of a queen, hunted by the galaxy. Outside, soldiers searched with fury, The queen roared in her throne room, promising blood. But deep in the tunnels, a human held two frightened children close. And in their trembling embrace, he discovered something greater than fear. He discovered purpose. The city above the tunnels boiled with noise and rage. The queen's soldiers stormed every street, knocking on doors, dragging out families, and tearing apart homes in their search. No stone was left unturned, no shadow left unchecked. The queen had promised gold for the safe return of her daughters, but death for anyone who dared to hide them. Fear became the weapon, sharper than any blade. The whole city turned into hunters. In the palace, generals barked orders. Messengers carried sketches of the princesses, showing their glowing eyes and small, delicate features. The drawings spread through markets and taverns, through back alleys and across docking bays. The words were always the same: bring them alive, or face the queen's fury. Every greedy soul wanted the reward, every coward feared punishment. The city had become a trap where even whispers could kill. But deep under the streets, in the tunnels where water dripped and pipes groaned, Jace crouched in silence with the two girls. The younger one slept against his chest, her tiny body exhausted from fear. The older stayed awake, her glowing eyes fixed on the darkness ahead. Her small hand refused to let go of his sleeve. Every sound made her shiver. Every echo of boots above made her squeeze tighter. Jace knew the danger. He had worked these tunnels for years, but never had they felt so alive with threat. The air carried the sound of soldiers above, the scrape of armor, the bark of alien hounds trained to smell fear. He pressed his back to the cold wall, trying to steady his breathing. If the guards sent their hounds into the tunnels, hiding would be useless. He had to keep moving, deeper, where no one dared to go. Step by step, he led the girls through the maze of dripping pipes. Their footsteps were soft, but even the smallest noise felt too loud. The younger one stirred, whispering in her alien tongue. He did not understand the words, but he understood the tone: fear, hunger, and trust all tangled together. He patted her shoulder gently, whispering, "Quiet, little one. We must stay silent." Her glowing eyes blinked open, and she nodded as if she truly understood. Above them, soldiers shouted, "Search the drains! Tear open the grates!" Their boots thundered against the metal streets, sending vibrations down into the tunnels. Jace froze, pressing the girls behind a rusted pipe. Through a crack in the wall, he saw the beams of torches flash across the street above. One wrong sound, one wrong movement, and death would pour down on them like fire. The older girl whispered suddenly, her voice shaking but sharp, "No trust, Palace." Her words shocked him. She knew enough of his language now to say it clearly. Someone in the palace itself had wanted them gone. That explained the impossible vanishing. No enemy could enter the royal halls without help from within. Jace felt his stomach twist. This was not only about fear or survival. This was betrayal deep inside the queen's own court. The tunnel stretched on, darker and colder. They reached an old maintenance chamber, filled with broken tools and scraps of metal. Jace stopped, his body aching, his throat dry. The girls huddled close, their tiny forms shivering. He tore a piece of cloth from his shirt and wrapped it around the younger one like a blanket. The older one stared at him, her glowing eyes softer now, no longer. Seeing him as just a stranger, she whispered one word, almost like a name. "Brother." The word stabbed into his chest like fire. He had never been called that, not by anyone who meant it. He swallowed hard, his voice breaking as he whispered back, "I'll protect you." But even as he spoke, he heard something that froze. His blood, the low growl of alien hounds, the sound echoed through the tunnels, deep and hungry. Jace's heart raced. The queen's hunters had unleashed their beasts into the lower levels. Once those creatures caught a scent, there was no escape. He grabbed the girl's hands, pulling them deeper. The tunnels twisted and turned, dripping with slime and shadows. The growls grew closer, joined by the harsh voices of soldiers. "Find them. The queen wants their heads." Jace's breath burned in his lungs. He remembered every corner, every hidden hatch, every place the workers had abandoned. At last he reached an old drainage shaft, half collapsed and stinking of rust. Without thinking, he pushed the girls through the narrow gap, crawling behind them. The growls echoed louder now, claws scraping against stone. One of the beasts howled, the sound shaking the tunnels. The younger girl whimpered, pressing her glowing face into his chest. Jace wrapped his arm around her, whispering, "Hold on! Just hold on!" They stumbled into a cavern where old machinery rusted in silence. The air here was thicker, filled with dust and oil. It was forgotten by the city above. Jace leaned against a wall, gasping for air. The girls clung to him, their trust unshaken despite the terror. And in that moment, Jace realized something. He was no longer only hiding them. He was now hunted, marked as their protector. The galaxy might see him as nothing more than a janitor. But the Queen's hunters would learn soon. Even the smallest man could fight the dark when innocence clung to his chest. The old cavern became their shelter. It was damp and cold, but it offered walls thick enough to keep the hunters out. Jace lit a tiny flame with a broken lighter he carried from work. The weak glow touched the faces of the two girls, showing their wide eyes and pale skin marked with faint glowing veins. They looked fragile, yet something inside them shone brighter than fear. The younger one clung to his shirt, refusing to let go. Her small body trembled. But when Jace smiled, softly she calmed. The older sister sat close, watching him with those glowing eyes that seemed too wise for her age. She still did not trust easily, but her silence was no longer sharp with suspicion. It was softer now, thoughtful, as if she was deciding what kind of man this human truly was. Jace shared the last crumbs of his food. He broke the bread carefully into small pieces, handing it to them first before taking a bite himself. The younger girl chewed quickly, hunger stronger than fear. The older one took her time, her eyes, never leaving his face. Finally, she whispered a word in her broken tongue. "Thank you." The sound made his chest ache. A princess of the galaxy, a daughter of the fiercest queen alive, was thanking him, a forgotten janitor. He shook his head, whispering back, "You don't need to thank me. It's nothing." But deep inside, he knew it was not nothing. It was everything. As the hours passed, the girls began to relax. The younger one leaned against his arm and fell asleep, her glowing eyes closing at last. The older one stayed awake, sitting close but not touching. Her voice came in broken words, halting but clear enough for him to understand. "Palace. Not safe. Danger inside." Jace frowned, leaning closer. "Danger? From who?" he asked. She shook her head, struggling with words. Finally, she whispered, "Family. Betray. Mother." Jace's breath caught. The truth he had suspected was spoken. By the very child who had lived it, the vanishing was no enemy attack. It was betrayal from within. Someone in the palace had wanted the daughters gone, perhaps dead. And now, by fate or accident, they had landed in his care. A human no one noticed, no one feared, no one respected. But maybe that was why they had chosen him. He was invisible to the world, but not to them. The older girl looked at him for a long time. Then slowly, she placed her small hand on his. Her touch was light, trembling, yet it carried the weight of trust. "Brother," she whispered again, this time without hesitation. The word broke something inside him. He had never had family, never had someone look at him with such pure faith. Tears stung his eyes, though he tried to hide them. "I'll protect you," he said, his voice rough. "I promise." The bond was forged in that silence. Not of blood, not of duty, but of something deeper. Trust. And in that moment the cavern no longer felt as cold. The flickering flame no longer seemed so small, but danger was never far. Above the tunnels, hunters still searched, their hounds sniffing through alleys, their voices harsh. The Queen's fury burned like fire across the city. She believed enemies had stolen her daughters, and her wrath would not rest until she found them. If she discovered they were hiding with a human, even the stars might fall under her rage. Jace tried to rest, but sleep would not come. Every creak of the pipes, every drip of water made him tense. The older girl finally whispered, "You tired?" He gave a weak smile. "Maybe, but I can't sleep yet." She tilted her head, studying him with curious eyes. You, strong, she said simply. The words were clumsy, but their meaning was clear. To her, strength was not the sword or the crown. It was the arms that held her sister safe, the hands that gave food before eating, the heart that stayed when others would run. Jace swallowed hard. He had never been called strong, not once in his life. Yet from the lips of a princess, it felt real. It gave him courage. As dawn neared, faint light seeped through cracks in the tunnels. The girls stirred, their faces pale but calmer than before. Jace looked at them and felt something new rise in his chest. Not fear, not burden, but purpose. He was no longer just a janitor, cleaning halls no one cared for. He was a guardian, their shield against the galaxy, and though the hunters searched above, though betrayal poisoned the palace, the bond between them was now unbreakable. The queen's daughters had vanished from her palace, but in the dark, they had found something else. They had found a human, who treated them not as pawns, not as royalty, but as children who needed care, and that bond was stronger than any crown. The tunnels could only hide them for so long. Word spread across the city that the queen's daughters were still alive. The reward for finding them grew larger, and so did the number of hunters. Soldiers searched with blades, mercenaries searched with greed, and spies searched with whispers. Every shadow carried danger, every breath carried risk. Jace knew they could not keep running forever. The younger princess was growing weak from hunger, her small body not built for nights of fear and damp stone. The older one tried to be strong, but even her glowing eyes dimmed with exhaustion. Jace's heart ached each time he looked at them. They needed food, water, safety. But none of those things existed in the open streets. He had to be clever. He had to use what little he knew. Jace had always been overlooked, always unseen. No one ever respected a janitor. No one ever thought he was important. But in his years of quiet work, he had learned the bones of the city. He knew the broken alleys where soldiers never walked. He knew the abandoned factories filled with rusting machines and forgotten tools. And he knew how to build with scraps that others threw away. That was when the idea came. If they could not keep running, maybe they could fight, not with strength, not with weapons, but with traps. Jace led the girls deeper into the ruins of an old factory where he had once cleaned broken machines. Its roof sagged, its walls cracked, but its halls were wide and filled with shadows. Here he began to work. He scavenged metal rods, rusted chains, broken wires, and shattered glass. His hands moved quickly, his mind sharper than he had ever known. He set tripwires along the doors, hidden beneath dust. He tied loose beams with rope, waiting to collapse with a single pull. He spread shards of glass where torchlight would never reach. Every trap was simple, but deadly in the right moment. The girls watched in silence, their eyes wide as they saw the human build weapons from nothing. The older whispered softly, "Smart." Jace gave a weak grin. Not smart, just desperate. But inside, he felt a flicker of pride. For once in his life, his skill with scraps meant survival. Not just survival for him, but for the children who trusted him. That night, the hunters came. Shadows moved across. The factory walls, torches glowing like fireflies, voices echoed harsh and cruel. "Search here. The human rat may be hiding them." Jace pulled the girls close behind a broken furnace. "Stay silent," he whispered, his voice shaking but firm. They nodded, clinging to him, their glowing eyes hidden in the dark. The first soldier stepped inside, his boots crunching on broken stone. The tripwire snapped. A heavy beam fell from above, striking him to the ground with a sickening crack. The others shouted, rushing forward. Jace's heart pounded, his hands shaking. The traps began to spring one after another, chains snapped, pulling down more beams. Glass shards tore through boots and skin. The hunters cursed and stumbled, their torches falling. The factory roared with chaos, every corner turned against them, every step carried danger. Jace held the girls tight, whispering, "Not yet, not yet." He waited, his mind racing. This was no battle of strength. This was survival through wit and patience. When the hunters split apart, chasing shadows in confusion, Jace moved. He pulled the girls through a narrow crack in the wall, his hand never leaving theirs. Behind them, screams and curses filled the night. But the danger was not gone. One of the mercenaries spotted them as they slipped out. "There! The human has them!" The shout split the silence. Jace's heart dropped. Torches flared, boots thundered, and blades flashed. He ran, dragging the girls through the maze of broken alleys. The younger one cried softly, her voice trembling with fear. "Hold on," Jace gasped. Just a little further. They reached the edge of the ruins. But here, the path ended, a wall of crumbled stone blocking the way. The hunters closed in, their voices loud, their footsteps fast. Jace turned, his body shaking with exhaustion. He had no more traps, no more tools, no way out. Only his arms and his will stood between the girls and death. The older princess stepped in front of him, her glowing eyes fierce. "Brother," she said firmly, "not leave us." The word gave him strength. He planted his feet, ready to fight with nothing but his fists. But before the hunters reached them, a sound split the night, a voice filled with fire and thunder. It was the queen herself. The soldiers froze, dropping to their knees. Even the mercenaries trembled. The queen had come to the hunt, her fury blazing in her voice. "Bring them to me alive," she commanded, her tone sharp enough to cut steel. And in that moment, Jace realized the trap was not his factory. The real trap was here, between him, the children, and the wrath of their other. The night air shook when the alien queen arrived. Her shadow fell across the ruins like a storm swallowing the sky. She wore armor blacker than night, marked with glowing red veins that pulsed like fire. Her crown was sharp as blades, her eyes burned with fury brighter than torches. Every soldier bent low, pressing their heads to the ground. Even the mercenaries, greedy for reward, dropped their weapons and trembled. Her daughters had vanished, and now she had come herself to claim them. The queen's voice roared through the streets. "Bring me my blood or burn in my fire." The sound cracked stone, shook dust from broken walls, and made even seasoned warriors pale with fear. None doubted her rage. None questioned her wrath. For when the queen was angry, entire worlds had fallen. Jace stood in the ruins with the two girls clinging to him, his heart hammered like a drum, his throat dry as sand. The children pressed against his chest, their glowing eyes wide with terror. They whispered in their alien tongue, their small voices trembling. "Mother, Mother." Jace knew this was the moment, the one he had dreaded. If the queen saw him holding them, she would not forgive. He would be crushed before he could even breathe. The soldiers spread out, torches lighting the broken walls. The queen's gaze swept across the ruins, sharp and merciless. Then her eyes stopped. She saw them, her daughters curled up on the chest of a human, sleeping in his arms despite the chaos around them. For a moment, the queen's fury froze. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Her children were not trembling in fear of her enemies. They were resting in peace against a man she considered lower than dust. The soldiers raised their blades, ready to seize the human, but the queen lifted her hand, stopping them. Silence fell, heavy and suffocating. Her burning eyes stayed locked on Jace. Every heartbeat felt like a knife pressed to his throat. Jace held tighter to the girls, his arms shaking but unwilling to let go. If he was to die, he would not abandon them. He whispered softly, "Don't be afraid. I'm here." The older princess stirred, her glowing eyes opening slowly. When she saw her mother, she gasped, but instead of running to her, she clung tighter to Jace's sleeve. "Brother," she whispered, her voice fragile but firm. The queen heard it. Every soldier heard it. A murmur spread among them like wildfire. The princess had called the human her brother. The queen's fury flared again. But it was no longer simple rage. It was confusion, grief, and disbelief tangled into fire. Her daughters should have been terrified, desperate to return to her, but they had chosen safety in the arms of a human janitor. The image was a blade in her pride. Her voice shook the air. What sorcery is this? Jace did not answer. He had no words, no excuses, no plan. He only had the truth. The bond between him and the children, forged in fear, hunger, and kindness. The queen stepped closer, her footsteps cracking the stone beneath her. Every breath she took carried the heat of fire. The soldiers bowed lower, some trembling so hard their armor rattled. At last the queen stood before him, towering like a mountain of fury. Her eyes burned into his soul, searching for weakness. "You dare touch what is mine?" she growled, her voice deep as thunder. Jace's knees wanted to give way, but he forced himself to stand. He held the girls close and whispered, "They're not just yours. They're children. They needed someone. I couldn't leave them." The words spilled from his lips before he could stop them. The queen's face twisted in rage. How could a human speak back to her? The ruler feared across the stars. But before she could strike him down, the younger princess stirred awake. Her glowing eyes blinked open, soft and innocent. She looked up at her mother, then at Jace, and with a trembling voice she whispered, "Safe. With him." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. The queen's breath caught, her fury cracking for the first time. Her own blood, her own daughter, had spoken not of fear, not of her mother's protection, but of the human safety. The court of soldiers shifted nervously. None dared to speak, but every one of them felt the ground shake, not from the queen's power, but from the truth before them. A human, nothing more than a shadow in their city, had calmed what even the queen could not. Her wrath burned hotter, but it was no longer pure. It was tangled with doubt, with a wound deeper than pride. Her voice cracked the air. "Why do you trust him? Why not me?" The older girl raised her chin, her small voice trembling but brave. "Because he stayed," she whispered. The words stabbed sharper than blades. The queen's rage faltered. Her chest heaved, her eyes narrowed, but she did not strike. For the first time in memory, the queen of fire and fury stood still, shaken not by armies but by the gentle truth spoken by her daughters. Jace stood silent, his heart pounding. He knew death could come with her next breath, but he also knew something had shifted. The queen's wrath had met its match, not in battle, not in war, but in the quiet bond of trust between a human and her children. The ruins stood silent. Only the flicker of torches and the heavy breathing of soldiers filled the air. The alien. Queen towered before the human, her fury still blazing, yet her daughters clung to him as if he were their last shield. No blade, no army, no command could break that sight, and the galaxy seemed to hold its breath. The soldiers waited, their hands tight on their weapons. They expected the queen to strike, to tear the human apart for daring to touch her bloodline. Some even leaned forward, eager to see his body crushed under her wrath. But the queen did not move. Her burning eyes stayed fixed on the two girls who refused to let go of the man they now called brother. "Release them," the queen growled, her voice shaking the ground. Jace's arms tightened instead. His body trembled, but he stood firm. "If I let them go," he whispered, "they'll lose the only safety they trust." The queen's fury flared, her crown glowing with heat. "You dare defy me, human?" The soldiers gasped, their faces pale. No one had ever spoken to the queen like this and lived. But Jace did not lower his eyes. His voice cracked, but his words carried strength. "I don't defy you," he said. "I protect them." The words were simple, yet they cut deeper than any sword. The younger princess raised her head, her glowing eyes shining with tears. "Mother," she whispered softly, "don't hurt him." The older one followed, her small hand gripping Jace's sleeve. "Tighter, he saved us," she said firmly, her voice louder than her years. Every soldier froze, their armor rattling as they shifted uneasily. The daughters of the queen had spoken, not with fear, not with command, but with a plea. And it was for a human. The queen's chest rose and fell like a storm trapped within. Her pride told her to strike, to remind all that she was power, she was fire, she was unbroken. But her heart, the part she buried deep, trembled at her daughter's words. They had never clung to her like this, never whispered such fragile trust. Why had they given it to him? Why not her? The silence stretched until it cracked. The queen raised her hand and every soldier braced for the kill. But then slowly, her hand lowered. Her voice thundered through the ruins, yet it was not rage that carried it. It seems the stars have played their game with me, she said coldly. My daughters choose a human over their own blood. Her eyes narrowed on Jace, burning with both hatred and reluctant respect. You have stolen what belongs to me, yet you gave them what I could not, peace. The soldiers looked at one another, confused, afraid. This was not the fury they expected, not the slaughter they were ready for. Jace's knees weakened, but he kept his arms strong around the children. He did not speak, afraid any word might shatter the fragile balance. The queen stepped closer, her towering figure casting shadow over all three. Her voice dropped low, only they could hear. You will not die tonight, human, she whispered. Not because you deserve mercy, but because my daughters would never. Forgive me. Her eyes flicked to the girl, softening for the briefest moment. They call you brother, so brother you will be. The words struck like thunder. The soldiers gasped, their discipline breaking. Had their queen truly spoken such a thing? To name a human as kin to her royal blood? It was unthinkable, it was impossible, it was history rewritten before their eyes. The older princess smiled faintly, her small voice clear. See, brother, you stay. Jace felt his throat tighten, his chest heavy with emotions he could not name. He had survived the queen's wrath not with strength, not with weapons, but with love given by two frightened children, and that love had changed everything. The queen turned sharply, her cloak of fire trailing behind her. To the palace, she commanded, her voice sharp again. My daughters will return. The soldiers obeyed instantly, though their eyes lingered on the human. Whispers already spread like sparks. This night would echo across the stars. The daughters of the fiercest queen had vanished, only to be found in the arms of a human, who gave them safety, and that truth could not be silenced. Jace followed as the girls held his hands tightly. Each step felt heavier, yet brighter. He knew the galaxy would never see him as just a janitor again. He was now something more. Protector, brother, and the man who stood before a queen's fury and lived. Above the ruins, dawn began to break. The first light of day touched the shattered city. But in that light, something greater than power was born. Not fire, not crowns, not armies. Only the bond of trust between children and a human who refused to let go. And in that bond, the galaxy felt a shift that would be remembered forever.